Overseas now, as Hamas militants launching a brand new weapon, unmanned aerial drones, as military action intensifies between Israel and Gaza. This is brand new video from Gaza, aired by Hamas TV, that shows an armed drone flying in the sky over the coastline, aired after Israel shot down a drone along the southern coastline as tensions there continue to escalate. Welcome, everybody. Brand new hour now of America's Newsroom. I'm Martha McCallum.
And I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning. Today marks the 7th day of Operation Protective Edge. Militants firing nearly 1,000 rockets into Israel. Since the start of this last round of hostilities, Israeli forces pounding Hamas targets, and now Hamas taking it to a new level using drones. David Lee Miller is live in Sderot, southern Israel. What do we know about these drones, David Lee?
Bill, let's start with the latest information. We just received word that as I speak to you right now, air raid sirens are now going off in the city of Tel Aviv. Militants in Gaza firing rockets in the direction of Tel Aviv. This is something that we have repeatedly seen, and so far, despite the barrage of rockets that have taken place during the last 7 days, there have been no fatalities among Israelis. Now, let's move on and talk about what you just mentioned a moment ago, the drone that Hamas says it sent up that flew into Israeli airspace. The question is this a game changer? At this point in time, it is too early to tell, but this much we do know for certain. This morning at about 6:30, Hamas did send up a drone that crossed over into Israeli airspace. It was shot down at approximately 7:30, about 14 miles into Israel, along the coastline of the city of Ashdod. The design of this particular drone is an Arabil 3. It's of Iranian design, and the video that we've been looking at was released by Hamas TV. And we do not know for certain if the actual drone that you see on this video is the very same drone that crossed into Israeli airspace. If you take a look at this drone, Bill, you'll see that it does have rockets. It is armed. It is not clear if the rocket that entered into, or that the drone that entered into Israeli airspace was armed. It may have just been for surveillance purposes. That information has not been released. In any event, again, it was neutralized, as they say, by a Patriot missile. What the Hamas militants are clearly trying to do by using a drone aircraft is to circumvent the Iron Dome missile defense system. As you just mentioned, there have been hundreds and hundreds of rockets fired into Israel. Today alone, at least 71 rockets have been fired. There's one injury in one city. An 8-year-old boy suffered light wounds. And just a short time ago, not far from where I'm standing, a rocket did damage on a house and a car. This as troops continue to mobilize near the border. Bill?
David Lee, thank you. David Lee Miller reporting there live. Martha.
Well, Israel's prime minister was on Fox News Sunday, putting the attacks in Israel in American terms. Listen to this.
I just want your viewers to imagine the United States being bombarded, not in one city or 2 cities, but in every city between New York and Colorado. Maybe 20% of the United States would be exempt from this. 80% of your citizens would have to be in bomb shelters or ready to go into bomb shelters within a minute to a minute and a half max. You can't, no country can accept that. We can't accept that, and we'll take the necessary action to stop it.
Britt Hume is our senior political analyst. He interviewed Mr. Netanyahu yesterday when he was in for Chris Wallace and anchoring on Fox News Sunday once again. Britt, good to have you here this morning.
Thanks, Martha.
Your interview with Benjamin Netanyahu, he was reluctant to tell exactly how far they're willing to go or how far along in this process they are at this point. He was really keeping his cards very close to the vest and leaving his options wide open.
Well, he was, Martha, except I think a couple of things came through in the interview. One was you noticed that when he was asked when he described the mission, it was simply to restore a state of relative calm. It was not the elimination of Hamas. He's not talking about destroying Hamas. He's talking about suppressing this constant missile barrage that comes out of Gaza, from Hamas's forces there. And these strikes that Israel has mounted have been quite numerous and spectacular when you see the explosions. But that kind of masks the fact that I think this is a limited operation with a limited goal.
What do you think, Britt, so far, having watched Middle East tensions over several presidencies, about this president's response to what's going on there right now?
Well, I think at this point, the United States is really doesn't have much of a role to play here. I mean, the U.S. puts out the usual statements calling for calm and whatnot. And what American presidents and the succession of them who have tried to do this goes back eons, it seems. We're always trying to broker some kind of peace between Israel and its neighbors. And there have been some successes. The peace deal with Egypt, the peace deal with Jordan, signed under President Clinton, have been successful. But the knottiest problem of all has been Israel and the Palestinians. And the problem, of course, in dealing with that is that the Palestinians have proved to be not a particularly reliable partner. You don't know who to deal with. For example, if you're trying to deal with Mahmoud Abbas, he's the Fatah party. And you got Hamas in Gaza. There's no indication that Hamas is prepared to participate in any serious peace deal. This is the diplomatic dilemma. I don't think there's a military role for the U.S. here, except perhaps to help Israel with some supplies. But that's where we are. We're totally allied with Israel in the end. But the U.S. is not. I don't think the U.S. has been a factor in all this.
Well, he also brought up Iran with you, and there's a concern out there that, given everything else that's going on in the Middle East, that Iran may be sort of moving along the track in terms of its nuclear program, sort of while the world's attention is focused in these other places.
Well, there's a lot of focus in the days immediately ahead of us, Martha, on this effort the U.S. has made with some of its partners to make a deal with Iran dealing with its nuclear program. Mm-hmm. Benjamin Netanyahu made it clear yesterday that he's very afraid that what will come out of this would be a bad deal in which Iran agrees to some small steps and agrees to inspections and then goes about its business of building a nuclear weapons arsenal. And that no deal, he said, would be better than a bad deal. And I think he has a point there. I think the administration is dying to make a deal so it can hold up the achievement to the American people and saying, look, our foreign policy is having a notable success here. Mm-hmm. But obviously what matters is the details. And in terms of the kind of a deal a really tough deal, the kind of Netanyahu described and that he wants and that many in this country want, I think that's unlikely to happen. And that probably the greatest likelihood is there'll be no deal. But there is a possibility of the kind of bad deal Netanyahu talked about.
Very interesting interview. Britt, thank you very much.
Thank you, Martha.
Good to see you.
You too.